Hi, this is Dr. Charles Babers again, and this is another study in the Babers Bible Study series. Today's study is Rising Above Adversity, Joseph in Potiphar's House, and it's based on Genesis chapter 39. Genesis 39:1. And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. Because they were highly offended by Joseph's dreams, which seemed to suggest that they and their parents would one day have to bow down to him, the youngest member of the family, Joseph's brothers conspired together to eliminate him. Most of the brothers wanted to kill Joseph, but Reuben intervened on his behalf and convinced his brothers to spare his life. They stripped Joseph of his beloved coat of many colors and threw him into a deep pit. When they saw a caravan of Ishmaelite merchants traveling past, they lifted him out of the pit and sold him into slavery. The merchants were on their way to Egypt to sell their wares, and they added Joseph to the collection of items that they had to sell. Joseph could have been bought by anyone in Egypt, but he just happened to be bought by Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's personal servants. This placed him in the capital city and within reach of Pharaoh himself. This eventually would prove to be fortuitous, though it would first be somewhat problematic for Joseph. Genesis 39, 2 through 3. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. Young Joseph turned out to have a talent for administration and management. His talents and abilities soon caused his Egyptian owner and master, Potiphar, to take notice of him and to make him a household servant instead of a slave working out in the fields. While working there in Potiphar's house, everything that Joseph did seemed to prosper. Read Psalms 1 and 3. Genesis 39, 4 through 6. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him. And he made him overseer over his house, and all that he had he put into his hand. And it came to pass, from the time that he had made him overseer in his house, and over all he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught he had, save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. God blessed Joseph to the point that not only did he personally prosper, but the entire household prospered because of him. Potiphar saw that Joseph was effective in all that he did and put him in charge of all his affairs, not just the house and the household servants, but also his fields and his animals. Knowing that Joseph was in charge of everything, Potiphar did not worry about anything except what he ate every day. Joseph's abilities made a place for him in Potiphar's house, just as Proverbs 18 and 16 says, quote, "A man's gift maketh room for him, and bringeth him before great men." Genesis 39, 7 through 10. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, "Lie with me." But he refused, and said unto his master's wife, Behold, my master worrieth not what is with me in the house, and he hath committed all that he hath to my hand. There is none greater in this house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness, and sin against God? And it came to pass, as she spake to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not unto her to lie by her, or to be with her. Young Joseph caught the eye of Potiphar's wife. She might have been physically attracted to him. She might have been drawn to him because he was constantly in front of her as a result of being put in charge of all the household affairs. She might have seen him as the most powerful individual in the household and been infatuated by that position of power. But whatever the reason, she approached Joseph in secret and asked him to lay with her. Joseph refused her advances, saying that he could not betray the trust that his master Potiphar had placed in him. He reminded her that Potiphar had placed everything in the whole household under his control and authority, with one exception. Everything that Potiphar owns was subject to his instructions, whims, and desires, except for her, whom Potiphar had naturally reserved only for himself. But despite Joseph's constant refusals, the wife persisted in her inappropriate advances day after day. He might have tried to avoid her as much as possible, but his household duties meant that he would inevitably have to cross paths with her daily, and she probably went out of her way to make sure that those daily meetings occurred. Genesis 39:11 through 12. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men of the house there within. And she caught him by his garment, saying, Lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand and fled, and got him out. The fact that Joseph was a house servant and that Potiphar trusted him to do his job within the house with absolutely no supervision was a blessing that became a curse, because one day Joseph found himself in the house alone with Potiphar's wife. If he had been a field servant, she might never have seen him. If he had not been so trustworthy, Potiphar might never have allowed him to be in the house without someone else supervising him. However, one day he went into the house to, quote, do his business, and found himself alone with the woman who had made it perfectly clear that she wanted to have her way with him. Knowing that they were alone probably made her even bolder than she had been on other occasions, because this time she didn't just ask him to lie with her. She reached out to grab hold of him with the intention of forcing him to do what she wanted. Luckily for Joseph, she only grabbed his outer cloak or robe, which Joseph was able to squirm out of and run out of the house, leaving the garment behind in her hands. Genesis 39:13 through 15. And it came to pass, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and was fled forth, that she called unto the men of the house, and spake unto them, saying, See, he hath brought in an Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in unto me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. And it came to pass, when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled, and got him out. Perhaps she wanted to get revenge on Joseph for spurning her advances. Maybe she just wanted to have an excuse for why she would have his clothes in her possession. Whatever her motivation, after Joseph had fled, Potiphar's wife screamed and called out to the men of the house. When they came to see what was wrong, she told them the lie that Joseph had tried to take advantage of her. She said that he had only run away when she screamed for help. It has been said that the most believable lies are those that include within them a grain of truth. And this is the very type of lie that Potiphar's wife told concerning Joseph. There truly was something that had happened between her and Joseph. One of them did actually try to take advantage of the other. After the unwanted advances had been resisted, Joseph had actually fled from her presence, leaving behind his clothes. To corroborate her story, the wife was even able to present Joseph's garment as evidence. With no other eyewitnesses to refute her statements, her accusations would have been quite compelling. Making matters even worse would have been the fact that this was a case of the word of the wife of an influential public official against that of a poor slave. And even scripture says that the words of a poor man are not heard. That in Ecclesiastes 9 and 15 through 16, which says, quote, Now there was found in it a poor wise man, and he by his wisdom delivered the city. Yet no man remembered the same poor man. Then said I, Wisdom is better than strength. Nevertheless, The poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are not heard. Ecclesiastes 9:15 through 16. Genesis 39:16 through 18. And she laid up his garments by her until his Lord came home. And she spake unto him according to these words, saying, The Hebrew servant which thou hast brought unto us came in unto me to mock me. And it came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled out. And it came to pass, when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spake unto him, saying, After this manner did thy servant to me, that his wrath was kindled. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound. And he was there in the prison. When Potiphar returned to his house, his wife repeated the same story to him that she had told to the servants who came when she screamed. He believed her words and the evidence that she presented to prove her lies. As a result, Joseph was thrown into the king's prison. There is no indication in Scripture that he even had an opportunity to present his side of the story or to confront his accuser. While this may seem unfair by modern American standards, it was not unusual for that day and time. Here again, we see God's hand on Joseph's life because being bought by Potiphar proved to be fortuitous. If he had been bought by anyone else, he might have been executed for what he had been accused of doing instead of being thrown into jail. If he weren't executed, he might have been thrown into a different prison than the one in which the king's prisoners were housed, where he would eventually be noticed by a prisoner who had the king's ear. Genesis 39:21 through 23. But the Lord was with Joseph and shewed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there. He was the doer of it. The keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper. Just as earlier in Potiphar's house, Joseph found favor in the chief of the prison because of his hard work. The jailer made him what we would call a trustee, a prisoner who is given special privileges and liberties. In fact, he was put in charge of the entire prison and all of the other prisoners. Anything that was done in the prison was his idea or was done under his supervision. Under his leadership, the prison prospered in the same way that Potiphar's house had prospered earlier. There are a number of lessons that we can learn from this story from Joseph's life. First, Joseph's honesty, faithfulness, intelligence, and work ethic caused men in authority to notice him and to show him favor. Potiphar saw how well and how hard Joseph worked and put him in charge of his household and all his servants. His hard work made a place for him in Potiphar's house. Later, the chief of the jail saw how hard Joseph worked and put him in charge of all the prisoners and all the prison operations. So his hard work made a place for him even in the prison. 2. Joseph's early life working with his father in the home had prepared him to oversee Potiphar's house. His supervision of Potiphar's affairs prepared him later to oversee the affairs of the prison. 3. While the calamities that befell Joseph might have made it appear that God had forsaken him, in every situation God was with him and blessing him. This shows us that sometimes God's blessings don't necessarily look like what we think blessings ought to look like. We need to always remember Ephesians 8:28, which says, And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. Fourth, and most importantly, God was directing events to ensure that Joseph was in the right place to save his family. A. If his brothers hadn't sold him to the Ishmaelites, he would not have been taken to Egypt. B. If he had not been taken to Egypt, he would not have been bought by Pharaoh's official, Potiphar. C. If Potiphar had not trusted him enough to place him over his household, he would not have been seduced by Potiphar's wife. D. If Potiphar's wife had not seduced him and then falsely accused him, he would not have been thrown into the king's prison. All of these were leading inexorably toward Joseph's destiny of saving his family later on. If you like this study, why don't you check out some of the others that I have available on my YouTube channel? Thanks.